And we're live. Welcome to a very special edition of the PCS Q&A. I am your host, MJ Boyce, and I'm the Director of Community Outreach at PCS Grades. With me, as always, is the lovely Megan Harless. She is our resident PCS reform advocate, and oh, by the way, resident BA Center for Little Ears in your room, because we love you. Okay. So before we get over to Megan for those DoD updates and these lovely gentlemen that have decided to join us today from the International Association of Movers, we're going to go into those housekeeping items as we do every week. So here we go. First of all, as always, we come here with answers for you. You've got a question, go ahead and put that in the comment section right below and we'll get you that answer. If we don't know the answer, guess what? We know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, we're going to take your question for action and get back with you with an answer. Secondly, I say it all the time, yes, we bring these experts to you, from Transcom to education to the moving associations. We bring these experts to you because they know the answers. But occasionally you're going to come across a situation that is very specific to you and your family. So if you encounter those specific situations that are a little more specific than we might be able to help with in terms of details, there are two forever and always resources you must go to. Number one, your local chain of command. Number two, your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. Those are the people that can help move your situation for action. I say it every week. This is the third thing. People, we got to do our part. Y'all, we got to do our part. We got to flatten that curve. We have got to flatten this curve. It's going to be different from state to state, CONUS to CONUS, but we have got to do our part to flatten that curve, because when we do, we're going to flatten Murphy with it. Murphy, you're on notice. We are coming for you. And last, but certainly not least, again, I mentioned this is a very special episode because it is our 25th episode. Yay! Megan, you've got poppers. Come on now. We didn't get confetti. Woo! Scared the crap out of Megan. That was awesome.
I'm scared my cat running away now.
So we're full of surprises on this show. And guess what? Because it is our 25th episode, we have huge prizes. Today we are going to be giving away not one, but two $125 gift cards to Amazon. That's right. You heard me. $125 could be yours to Amazon. What do you have to do? You need to engage with us. Ask those questions. Provide that feedback. Tell us your concerns. Leave them in the comments. LOL smiley faces don't count, people. Don't count. But if you want to win $125 from Amazon, hit us up. Hit us up, y'all. Answer those questions. We'll give you those answers. And we also have, of course, our Hope Design Bling, and we'll be giving all of that at the end of the show. Also, because we don't want to leave our CONUS peeps out in the cold, because you can't attend live, you're probably sleeping. Anybody on the replay that engages, asks questions, you're entered to win too. So go ahead and get those questions in and get ready for an episode. With that, I'm going to throw it over to Megan for those DoD updates. Megan?
Hey, everybody. So we have a couple of things. The first topic that is sort of not really PCS related is the tax deferment that a lot of groups have been speaking about lately. I know a lot of people use their tax refund as kind of like their PCS fund when they prepare for that. So if you are concerned about it, military people are not allowed to opt out of it. But if you're concerned about it, set that extra money aside in your paycheck, take your last year's tax return and go talk to your tax professional so they can kind of help you figure out how it's going to impact you. I know there's been several numbers that have been thrown around as to, you have to make a certain amount for it to not impact you, or it will. But definitely go speak to a tax professional if you have any concerns about that. The second thing I want to talk to you about real quick, or at least clarify, so we've seen a lot in the groups lately about what is CP marked on the inventory and on your boxes. CP is carrier packed. If you look at your inventory, there is a little key code there that has all your damage assessment codes in there. You will see that CP is carrier packed. That means that your moving company packed those items. It is not customer packed like a lot of people assume that it is. It is carrier packed. The last thing I want to touch on real quick is, what does an unpack mean? We've seen a lot of questions on this as well. What does it mean when you ask for a partial unpack or a full unpack? First, they should not be opening your boxes and just dumping them out onto the floor. The regulation states that they should be opening them and placing the items on the nearest flat surface, whether it's a counter, a table, a shelf, a cabinet. A cabinet that they can reach safely, that they're not having to climb onto the counter to put something at the very top of it. It also does not mean that they are rearranging your items to however you want. If you prefer your books to be alphabetical order by author and genre, or your Starbucks collection mugs to be alphabetical order by city and country, they are not there to do that. They will take the mugs out of the box and they will put the mugs in a cabinet, on a counter, on the table, whatever flat surface it may be, and then it'll be on you to rearrange however it is that you want at a later time. That's all I've got for now, so back to you, MJ.
Awesome. And okay, so for those of you who may have just noticed a lot of feedback coming back, and I was echoing because apparently I'm not loud enough on my own. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we've gotten that fixed for you. But I'm just going to go ahead and reiterate to everybody who's watching, we have 2 $125 gift cards for you today. And to enter to win, all you have to do is engage with us in the comments section below. That's questions, comments, concerns you might have. Hey, you know what? Share this, and maybe we'll give you an entry for that too. You don't want to be the only one with this knowledge. What's the use of that knowledge if it's just in your head? All right. So I am now going to introduce our topic. We're going to be going ahead and we're going to be talking about where we stand today as far as the PCS moving industry. Our military moves are just all over the place. Our peak season is extended, thanks COVID, and everything just looks different. We want to know how that impacted our PCS season and what that means for families going forward. So before we dive into those topics and start getting to the nitty-gritty of those questions, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests. They are both from the International Association of Movers, and I will start out with Mr. Chuck White. Chuck, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Chuck White, I'm the president of the International Association of Movers. We're located in Alexandria, Virginia. As appropriate for this session, I'm an Army brat. Dad was retired lieutenant colonel at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, and so kind of ended up in this neck of the woods and have been one of those guys who've been around DC for quite a while. I also was in the industry. I worked for a moving company for 11 years before I came to the association. I've been at the association heading on 16 years, and this is my second year as president of the organization. I don't want anybody out there starting to add up because I had jobs before that. So I just suffice it to say I'm old.
Okay, first of all, kudos to you. You can definitely stick around because you know how to make fun of yourself, which is what we do, at least I do, every week. So you're definitely on board with that. And kudos for being an Army brat, because we love our military brats. Whether they're young, whether they're quote unquote old, we prefer in the spouse world seasoned, although I'm not a French fry, I like to say Cabernet spouse, okay? So we'll go with that. But welcome, and we're very glad to have you. And okay, so next up is Mr. Dan Bradley, also from the International Association of Movers. Dan, would you mind going ahead and introducing yourself for us, please?
All right, I think I'm the feedback problem, so I'm hoping that this sounds okay.
You're good.
Good. Dan Bradley, I'm the Director of Government and Military Relations at the International Association of Movers. I've been doing that for a little over 2 years. I did 20 years in the Air Force and retired as a logistician in the Air Force. I did 8 years as a Department of the Army civilian as well in the freight side of the world, not in household goods. But I did do 3 years as the Director of Personal Property for the DoD at the Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, SDDC, in the Army prior to them transferring the program over to Transcom. So I probably did 10 PCSs in my 20 years in the Air Force, and had 4 Air Force brats along with me, along with my wife, when we did that. So happy to be on the show. I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to join you and talk.
Awesome. And we're so happy to have you. And again, okay, look, see, it's our family taking care of our family. It's our military community taking care of our military community. Awesome. Okay, so I have a shout out to the Air Force. Cool, because my daughter is about to give birth to an air baby here in the next couple weeks. So that's going to be kind of cool. So we'll see how that goes. And of course, I'm a Marine spouse here myself. Hoorah, yeah, kill Semper Fi. What?
Army.
And then
Go Army.
we've got our Army spouse. We've got our resident who keeps me in check. All right, we're going to dive right into these questions. Are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Here we go. Question number 1. I want to know a little bit more about the IAM, which is, because we love our acronyms, the International Association of Movers. I need to know a little bit more about that and what it is that you do.
Sure. So we are a trade association, meaning that we represent companies that are involved in the moving industry. We've got about 2,000 member companies that are part of our organization. We have representative companies, members in 170 countries. So we're very focused on the international side of the business, but obviously we've got to focus on domestic as well. So, that's a little bit about the association. Again, we're an advocate. We are a voice for the moving industry. We're a voice also in both directions. We advocate both for transferring information from our member moving industry companies to the Department of Defense, Transcom mostly now, but also from then Transcom back to our members. So we're kind of that middle ground, that middle leg of third leg of the stool, where you have Transcom on one side, you've got the military families on the other. We're kind of standing in between.
That's awesome. And before Megan goes ahead and asks the real meat and potatoes of all of this, Dan, can you tell me, you are the director of military and, I'm going to mess this up because it's not in front of me, but what is it that you do? Like, what does your role look like at IAM?
Yeah, Director of Government and Military Relations. So I try and have solid relationships, frankly, for our members to be able to engage when needed with Transcom, as Chuck said, with the Joint Personal Property Shipping Offices, the service headquarters representatives who deal with household goods. So try and maintain that relationship so that I can provide insight to them on issues that our members see from a moving perspective, and going back the other way, as Chuck said, kind of that middleman, so that I can take Transcom issues, GIPSO issues, and let our members know about that, and let them know, Transcom and those guys know what our members are thinking about certain policies. So trying to engage in all those venues to the extent I can, but it's government as well, not just DoD. So the General Services Administration does a lot of federal agency moves, responsible for their program. That program is called CHAMPS, Department of State, things like that. So we try and engage in all of those venues with all those agencies to try and, again, bridge the gap between the moving industry and the government and the military.
Which is appreciated because we all know there'd be a lot of gaps.
So MJ, real quick. So I used to have Dan's job. I was the director of government and military. And then our president, who had been with the organization for 20 plus years in that role, retired. And so I stepped up. And one of the first people that I thought of to replace myself was Dan. Dan and I, when he was in uniform, used to play this game, few wrestling matches between the two of us, and as Dan was in uniform, but we maintained a relationship once he retired. And I knew that Dan had the chops to be able to represent and understand what's going on the industry side and what's going on the government side. And he's been a real godsend for us the last 2 years. So
Wrestling.
And I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the old Looney Tunes cartoons, right? But the end of the day where the coyote and the sheepdog go walking off with their lunch pail in their hand after wrestling all day, that was Chuck and I when I was in the uniform.
Oh, we are so going to have an offline conversation about that. That's happening.
So I just have to say, so for the past 2 years, as I've worked on PCS reform, for everyone's background, I've been working with Chuck and with Dan, being able to hear the industry side of things as we navigate through the PCS process and how to improve it. And so now I love being where I'm at, where I can hear these little stories and the background information and see how everything kind of comes together. So that's really cool to see and to hear. So going into our next questions that we have, you guys work a lot with the transportation service providers that move military families. And this year with COVID and everything has given us a very odd peak season. So how did the stop movement orders that we had earlier this year impact the moving industry and the process of moving military families?
Yeah, it was dramatic. I mean, it just as it has affected every industry in the world, it obviously affected the moving industry as well. When people are hunkered down at home and doing business from home, and they're not out looking for new jobs, they're not out considering, i.e. moving, that obviously affects our folks. And it was dramatic. We took advantage of some of the programs that the federal government came out, payment protection plans, et cetera, because we were dramatically impacted. Basically, it couldn't have come at a worse time. As you guys know as well as we do, the moving industry is very seasonal. And as we move toward school letting out and school coming back in, at least in normal, non-virtual environments, that's when people want to move. Well, that was at the height of the pandemic. And so, as MJ said, there was a stop move order put in place by the Department of Defense. And I don't think people really understand the magnitude of moving within the Department of Defense. It's about 20%, 1 in 5 of every move worldwide. So when you have just one aspect of this would be dramatic, pandemic, no pandemic. But when 20% of the market just stops, then we stop. And so we were dead in our tracks. Dan, I don't know if you want to add on anything.
Yeah, I would just say that and Chuck alluded to it, right? That the kind of the worst time of the year for movers is coming into that spring season because cash flow is at its lowest, right? They had their big peak season moves. They've made the money that they're going to make for the lion's share of that. Things start trickling off after that into the fall and the winter and the spring. And if you're a mover, it's a cash dependent industry, and you got to have that cash to get ready now for an upcoming peak season. So you're starting to trickle in some moves here and there. You're starting to try and hire your new people. You're starting to, maybe purchase some new resources, but your cash flow is at its lowest probably for the entire year. So to have a pandemic hit right then and a stop movement happen right then, that reflush of some money starting to kind of make its way through your ranks is ended. And so now, you're going from where your cash flow kind of peaked and then died off and would start building up again. That buildup didn't happen in March, April, May, until we started getting into things into June. So, that was a critical time period for people to just try and survive and stay above water and keep people on their staff and all the things that a lot of companies went through. But the cyclical nature of the moving industry made it even more dire, I think, from a cash perspective at that point. And then one other thing I would say, just so we're all on the same sheet of music, Megan, you mentioned in your question, transportation service provider. And I think just kind of as a basis, it's something that I didn't really pay attention to when I was getting moved before I got onto the DOG job for personal property. But, almost nobody has one transportation service provider who is the only company that touches their move, right? So there's a lot to the industry in terms of agents that might come to your door to pack and pick you up, and maybe a freight company that might haul your stuff across the country, and then maybe another local moving and storage company who would handle it on the other end and store it on the other end. So there's a lot of pieces to a move that I think forms the basis of all this conversation. It's not just a transportation service provider. There's a lot of people touching that. And if you're going overseas, just even more then, right? You have port agents who are gonna containerize your stuff. You have agents on the other side on the foreign side of that are also going to touch your cargo, and another company that's going to pick that up and take it to your house. So it touches a lot of different companies when you're moving in the military.
And it's so, you know, what's interesting is you mentioned that you didn't know that when you were serving. I didn't either. I didn't know that there were more than one hand in a pot. I had no idea until we had a couple of military spouse turned military movers on our show who kind of went down that rabbit hole and explained that. And I'm like, okay, you're kidding. Because now I feel really bad. Like, I'm not a yeller. Well, aside from my kids, they'll say it's something different. But I mean, I will feel really bad if in the middle of a PCS stress, because we've all been there, I may or may not have mouth puked to somebody, and I feel really bad that it may have been the wrong person.
That's right.
And so I'm with you right there on I just found that out too. And I work in this industry too.
A question that we get a lot of times in the groups too, people saying, I just got the email of my transportation service provider, it says this, but I just got another email that says this. So who do I contact for what? And it's trying to explain to them, you know, you have one company that coordinates your move, that your move coordinator comes from, that you should be, you know, communicating with. And then you're going to have local agents on each end and that are going to take care of the on the ground work. And so that's a big, huge, confusing process for a lot of families and a lot of spouses to fully understand what it takes to move somebody.
Yeah, I mean, the best companies, and really it's kind of a new rule that's been mandated, the idea that there's a single point of contact, and that's what I would encourage your listeners to focus on. It is a convoluted process. It's a supply chain, and there are many players in this supply chain. But you should have and understand who your single point of contact is. Who has that number that I call to get a question answered? And that is the critical piece, because when you start reaching out and calling somebody who's local to you, maybe because you think you can get the best answer, that may not be the case. Find out who that trusted person is. The move coordinator is typical for that single point of contact, and direct almost all of your questions through them.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And we say that virtually every episode, that, you know what I mean? When in doubt, contact your move coordinator, because if he or she doesn't know the answer, he or she at least knows where to point you.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So we touched on it a little bit because of the stop move order and because of current conditions, because again, it varies from place to place on whether or not they're red lit, green lit. And before I continue that sentence, just for everybody who's watching, I see your questions coming in and I am loving this dialogue. We are definitely going to get them. We're going to hit them all. We may be answering your questions as we go through it. And if we don't, we're going to hit them on the back end. You will be heard. So anyways, as I was saying, we know that peak season is going to extend into the fall, right? So my question is, how is the rest of the year projected to look, and what is it from a military family perspective? What can military families who are still PCSing or getting ready to soon PCS, what can they expect?
Well, you know what? We've been asking some of those same questions. We meet as an industry with U.S. Transportation Command twice a week. We have what we call a peak season call with them, but we also, in the middle of the COVID environment, started to have another call that really focused on COVID issues. And we have one of the real positives that has come out of this is we've always asked the personnel community to come in, the people that are cutting those orders, that are determining when people move. We've always asked them to be able to come in and participate in our calls. And that really never had happened before COVID. Now they sit in on these calls on a weekly basis, and we have a real idea, or we try to get an idea of the orders cutting, how many orders have been cut, how many people are anticipated to move, how many people have already moved, and try to really figure out that delta of what's left over. Again, it's still a bit of a moving target, but we're about 60 to 70,000 moves under where we would typically be. So we believe that in looking at the number of moves that they're trying to do on a weekly basis to maximize the capacity, that we're still going to be another 2 to 3 months out in really catching up with all of the moves that have been put on hold. The thing is, I think it's okay for people because the capacity is there. We are not seeing what we call blackouts put in place, where that's a TSP says, I cry uncle, I can't handle anymore. We really are seeing little or none of that. So it appears to me that we've flattened the curve a bit, for lack of a better phrase, in that we've had the ability to have the personnel people there. We are able to do better forecasting. They're limiting, rather than just dumping everybody into a single week, we're limiting how many there are in each week. And so I think it's going to be a fairly smooth, fingers crossed, process as we move forward, even though it's been shifted to the right. Dan, did I miss anything?
No, I would just say the thing that families could expect, in my view, and I know, MJ, when you started this, you said, thanks COVID for extending our peak season. And here's how I would say that. Thanks COVID for extending our peak season, right? That, to me, that's a positive thing. And what I would say is that when you have that huge rush of shipments, we can get a doubling of weekly shipments during a very short time of peak season, right? A doubling of the amount of shipments that are going through the system and the process. And if you think that's not impactful for people who are trying to provide you that service, it is. And that would be in any industry, right? So you take a very short window when shipments almost double, and you ask companies to try and manage that and then have it fall off the table and shrink back down again pretty quickly after peak season's over, to the extent that now I don't need all the people that I had, I don't need all the trucks that I had, I don't need all the warehouse space that I had, but I have to maintain some of that capability. It creates a huge challenge, I think, for the moving industry to try to manage that. So what I would say is that the DoD's own numbers show that in the non-peak season, customer satisfaction survey scores go up. And they go up because people are managing your shipment. There's more people to manage those shipments. They're not being pushed by a huge spike in the number of shipments that take them right to their capacity and sometimes beyond because something broke or somebody didn't show up to work, or all those kind of things that can happen in any business. But it's a much more manageable process. And I think what families see that move outside of the peak is they have less issues, and the quality of their move is higher.
And you know what? That makes sense. And just to follow up, just to kind of reiterate and put in perspective what our families are thinking, I'm going to go ahead and throw up Elizabeth. Shout out, Elizabeth. I'm going to go ahead and bring her up there, because this is real life. This is not the only person to have written this. So I was going to ask that too, MJ. What should we expect with peak season extended, and how will it affect our move from Hawaii? It's making me nervous. What should we tell Elizabeth?
Well, Hawaii is a bit of an outlier. We've got this island here, and there are a very defined, finite set of movers that are on the island. We have Hawaii is considered international because it's over water. And we've got around 170 transportation service providers, TSPs, that are approved to operate in the international market. But there are only about 12 or 13 agents, the people that actually have a truck on the island, a warehouse on the island, people that are going to show up at your door. So all of those 170 work with those 13 or so agents on there, and that is the limiting factor. So if there is a place that I say I might have some concerns about, it might be Hawaii. though, again, we've seen this lengthening of the peak season. So I do believe that there is enough capacity left there to be able to handle the shipments that are going to be called for in the next few months and handle them in a quality way, as Dan was talking about. But Hawaii is a tough market.
Wow. I just going to throw ahead. I lived in Hawaii and it was considered Oconus. And yes, we did receive cost of living allowance, which we had to because it was so expensive to live there.
Yeah. Right.
It really is its own animal in many respects. So for you to put that in perspective for a location specific issue is huge. So what I'm guessing is that, basically it's a watch and see for a lot of it. And probably those, you said 12 or 13 there on the island are probably screaming uncle right about now, even on a, because of
the one other aspect of this is, again, we're still in this COVID environment. Hawaii's got a pretty tough road to hoe here moving forward. And the transportation offices there are all working remotely as well, is my understanding. Most of them are DoD civilians that are operating in those offices, and they're working remotely. So you've got a transportation service provider that's likely in CONUS. You've got hours and hours behind, many of them on the East Coast, and you're dealing with somebody in Hawaii. They are working remotely. You've got the agents there and they're on Hawaii time. And so this communication, so the key is really focusing on the communication, ensuring that your transportation service provider and your single point of contact, your move coordinator, has all of the information and understands your needs up front, I think goes a long way toward trying to alleviate some of those problems.
Awesome. And I believe it's called Aloha Time.
Aloha Time. I want some of that Aloha Time.
Yeah. So now we've had a few months of PCSing under whatever this new normal is and the current conditions that we have. Do y'all think that what we see now will continue next year and become the new normal, the new standard in regards to like extended peak season, the safety measures, and all that stuff that goes along with it?
Dan, you can get the crystal ball out. You can answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say on the health condition protocols, right? That Transcon called it, the safety stuff, the masks and the wipe down of high traffic areas, things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that continue. Frankly, we don't have a solution for the pandemic out there right now. I was a little surprised we got to look at some of the early business rules for 2021 and Transcom's asking us for our inputs on them. And they don't include specifically those health condition protocols as a specific part that was added to the rules, which they weren't in the rules last year either, and we're doing them this year. So it's not that they won't be included. I think they will be included. I think it'll continue on. As far as the expanded peak season, Chuck mentioned it earlier, Transcom and the services have done a nice job now of kind of putting together the personnel folks and the logistics folks in the same room and having conversations about orders integration into the PCS process, trying to find a way to make sure that when you are issued an order for PCS, that the transportation people know about it, as soon as possible so that they can start projecting some capabilities. And what they tried to do this year, and again, Chuck referred to it, what they tried to do this year was draw a line at about 9,000 shipments per week once the spout got turned back on for shipments, so that we didn't overwhelm the system, because we get as high as 12,000 shipments in a week in a normal peak season, but that's when everything is kind of geared up and running, and even that taxes everybody right to the end. But in this kind of season where people didn't have the labor that they normally have, didn't have the opportunity to bring people in to train them like they normally would, didn't have the cash on hand to kind of prep for things like lift vans, some of the boxes that they use to prep for international shipments, all those kind of things. So Transcom was cognizant of that. Industry made them aware that if you can't go from, a couple thousand shipments in a week or less, a couple hundred and the stop move, all the way up to 10, 11, 12,000 shipments. So they tried to put a cap on that at about 9,000 to say, okay, we'll ease into this. And while they exceeded that maybe once, maybe twice, they were pretty good about it, but that can only happen when the personnel folks are tied in with the logistics folks to try and smooth that out. So I guess what I would say from an industry side is I hope there's more of an extended peak season. And even if that is May to September, as opposed to, just kind of that end of June, July kind of real hard rush, that would be helpful for industry. And I think, again, it provide a better quality product for the customer.
We've been asking for that, Megan and MJ, for a long time from the industry perspective. Dan's already talked about it. We go from 5,000 or 6,000 shipments a week and spike to 12,000 almost overnight. And it runs like that for 5 or 6 weeks, and we drop back down to the 5,000 or 6,000. It's really hard for a business to manage those kinds of spikes. We've said for a long time, there are many single soldiers, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard. And did I miss anybody? I don't know. I didn't mean to if I did. But there are plenty of married military members that don't have children. Everything in our minds does not necessarily have to focus around getting kids out of school, getting kids into school. I understand those needs for those families that have children, and we would love to be able to supply the needs of those. But there's plenty that don't have to move during that time frame, even if they moved on the fringes of that. Back in 2019, it was Transcom who coined the phrase demand smoothing. And that meant try to smooth out this, not go from 5 or 6 to 12, but let's do 9 or 8 the whole time through. And they said it really was a cultural thing and they made an effort, but couldn't make it happen. But when the pandemic struck, they found a way to make it happen. So we're hoping that there will be some lessons learned from this, that we can provide better service, better quality to the military families if we don't go through these peaks and valleys.
Yeah, and I would suspect too, with how things are shifting with schools becoming virtual in many places, that need to move within that 2-week period might naturally be extended, because we can still move. My kids can finish up their school online in one location or start early online in the other location, depending on what those school districts offer. So I imagine, I suspect that the virtual learning piece might kind of help extend that out and smooth it out as well.
And can I just throw a couple of numbers behind what Chuck said, right? So this is off of a 2018 DoD demographics report that the DoD puts together that you can find online. And that 2018 report says 62.7% of all military personnel have no kids, right? 62%. And for those who do have kids, and I would say this is in round numbers because you have to do some figuring, but up to close to maybe 47% of those who do have kids are not of school age. So there's plenty of people who can PCS without a huge impact, right, to the summer school process of being off. Now, that's not to say that if I PCS somebody out of a job who doesn't have kids, that I might have to PCS somebody in to cover them that does have kids, right? So that's the math, that's the matrix that would have to be put together. But I would suspect there's a lot smarter people than me who could work on that. And that's not to solve it for, every month is the same. That's just to try and, give a little bit of more of a spread out of that peak season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to jump to, there's a question here from Kelly Rich as we were talking about the safety measures and requirements. If you can get that popped up there, MJ. It says, assuming that COVID will still be around next move cycle, what are the mask requirements for moving crews, maybe what they are now for moving crews? And how do we go about receiving assistance with crews who refuse to wear them? What can we do to help move crews considering COVID as a complication from the industry perspective?
I'll take that one. There's no question this is a partnership. And we've got to, this was a shift that no one foresaw, that no one understood. And there was a learning curve. There's no question about it. And there are some crew members that, while I completely understand their perspective, it's 80, 90, 100 degrees in California, and they've got to wear a mask and move furniture in and out of a home, air-conditioned home, out into 100 degrees. It's tough. I mean, we've all worn masks, and you've seen all the memes about what you do when you go outside and gas spray air when you're. So I understand it, but this is about protection of the force. This is about protection of families. And so I will say it is definitely our responsibility as an industry to do a little more education as we move forward to ensure that people understand this is life and death. This is safety. And we have to be able to, when we are engaged with families, have these masks on. There's just no question about it. What can you do? Number one, you can call your transportation office. You can get a quality control officer out there, and there have been numerous suspensions of TSPs this summer for their crews failing to have protective equipment on. So there's no question about that.
You might have to email your transportation office because some of them are working remotely and do not have call forwarding. So call them. If you don't answer, send an email.
The other thing is call your TSP. You've got that move coordinator. If she understands that there's somebody in your home that's not prepared, that does not have that protective equipment on, and you feel uncomfortable with that, then she's going to call right back to that agent who hired those people and say to them, if you want to continue to do work with us, you're going to make sure that those people have that protective equipment on. So I feel her pain. It is a requirement. It is something that we have to do as an industry. I think we did a better job. You can see that by the number of corrective actions that were taken from the time that the rules were implemented to where we are now. There are very few of them. People, I think, have a better understanding of what needs to be done. But there's still some knuckleheads out there. There's no doubt.
And I would just say on the other side of that too is we have some local agents, some movers who got in trouble for not having masks on because the members said, hey, I'm not going to wear a mask, so you don't wear a mask either. We don't need you to do that while you're in our house. And that authority, Transcom and the DOD has said over and over that the individual customer doesn't have that authority, right? So you can't tell a mover that they don't have to wear a mask in the house, because as soon as a quality assurance inspector comes by, somebody's going to get suspended from that move if they don't, even if you don't care and you tell them not to do it. So there's been those situations that, so as the customer, don't try and authorize something that you don't have the authority for. Don't tell people they don't have to wear a mask, because they do. And they can take those outside of the house and away from your property, right? So, and by property, I mean the things that you're moving. They can be on your property. They just can't be near things that are going to be that they're going to be moving. So, everybody needs a break from that. So inside their truck, in the front cab, or outside of those areas where they're not close to things that are coming and going to and from your house.
The smoke break rules apply to mask break rules.
Bingo.
Word. Yes. And can I just say, I want to appreciate you both for just basically saying exactly what many of us are thinking. First of all, we have to flatten the curve. Okay. We need to do our part to do whatever it takes to do that. Why do we have to do that? And I'm talking to my audience now, because there are people who can't come home on deployment. There are people who cannot PCS. There are people who cannot move without being stuck in their homes. There are people that can't deal with the logistics of the crazy of PCSing because of what is happening right now. And if we can do our part by being away from each other, or 6 feet, or following CDC guidelines, whatever that looks like in your area, following it to the T, we need to do our part to take care of each other, because it affects the mission. So I really appreciate your all's passion about that. We've had several people, Megan, actually, we've had several people asking specifically about move coordinators. Well, what if I can't get in touch with them because it's a time sensitive matter? Because let's just face it, in a PCS, it's always a time sensitive matter. Everything is time sensitive and has a date. So Megan, I remember you mentioning last show before that, and probably the one before that. What in God's name do we do if we can't get a hold of that person?
Sorry, was on mute. So Chuck and Dan, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but your move coordinator should be responding to you, I believe, within 30 minutes of you calling or leaving a message with them. If for some reason you are calling, you're emailing, you are not getting a response, you can, try to find your TSP's regular, usually 1-800 number of some sort, and ask for the customer service department to see if there's a manager available, a supervisor that you can speak with if you are unable to get a hold of your specific coordinator. If that doesn't work, you have your local transportation office. Again, call them, but know that many of them are remote working, so sometimes you can get a faster response by emailing as well. If that all fails and it's something that needs some dire attention immediately, you also have the option of your GIPSO. PIPSO, they're like your regional shipping offices, so you can find those contact information. If you go on to move.mil, click the customer service tab, there's a spot where you can input your zip code and it'll pull up your nearest one and you can give them a call. It'll also have their email as well because they are also remote working in some instances or have a skeleton crew on staff as well right now. All else fails, your last go-to is reaching out to the Transcom hotline number, which is also located on move.mil under customer service. They have somebody on staff that's supposed to answer it 24/7. You can let them know what your issue is. They may not have the answer to it, but they'll document it. They'll take your contact information and they'll use their channels to reach out to who needs to be notified of the issue. So that way they can get somebody back in contact with you then.
And can I just say also, as it pertains to the calling, the emailing, and everything like that, every link we refer to, every acronym, every website, we are dropping those links in the comment section for all y'all. You're not going to be left empty-handed. You don't have to keep hitting rewind, even though you'd love to see these lovely faces on your screen. We're going to go ahead and drop those in the links for you. Okay, so we need to talk PPM, formerly known as Diddy. So every year, we have many families that decide to move under a personally procured move, PPM. So we also see every year these like rogue movers and like scam companies, okay, because apparently we're a target. So what advice can you give to a family who's looking to do a PPM, and how can they protect themselves and like find a good and reputable company that's not going to screw them on the back end?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that.
Here we go.
That opened the door for me. So we're a trade association, and we vet the members of our organization. We have a website. It's our directory that is called Mobility Exchange. You can link to that from our iamovers.org website. Top right corner, Mobility Exchange. You can click on that, and that goes through. We have over 1,000 companies that are what we call validated. We go through a vetting process. All of the things that they say they have, proper licensure, proper insurance, et cetera, is all documented there. You can find links to be able to show that they still have their proper licensing, et cetera. So it's a valuable resource, I believe, if you are interested in doing a PPM. The next thing that we are doing, that really was formulated for a business to business type relationship where businesses are looking for partners to do work with. But we are looking at building a customer facing website where the customers can go on and get estimates and find validated companies. We're working on a designation right now where I am, and we're going to have an I am trusted mover designation that takes it even a step further on vetting of these companies to ensure that if people are looking to ensure that they're dealing with a reputable, licensed, insured company, that they can do so. And then if there are problems, IAM has an arbitration program, has programs in place where we can intervene on their behalf if they have problems. So the customer-facing website is coming down the road, But right now, our mobility exchange website really offers you the ability. I mean, it uses geolocation. It offers a lot of things to be able to say, I need a mover in X, and boom, you're going to find people on that website that are reputable, that you can trust.
And the other thing I would offer, and I suspect Megan knows this too, but if you want to Google, until we are kind of fully functional with that customer-facing website, and if you get lost in the mobility exchange, we could certainly show you how to use that tool. But you could just Google "protect your move," and that'll take you directly to a Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, a Department of Transportation website, and you can put information in on that company and find out if they're a licensed, properly licensed mover in the United States. So the FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, has a program as well called Protect Your Move, and they want to make sure that there aren't rogue movers out there as well.
Yeah. So as we move into this year, so for families who are preparing for crews to come in, still planning to move this year and to move them, what advice can you give to them while they're prepping their homes and preparing for the movers?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I would say in this crazy COVID environment, I don't believe that it's necessary to have more than one or two people. I mean, if it's a military member and their spouse and they both need to be there, fine. But having your kids maybe not be there, or others, family members not around, I think that's one way to avoid the possibility and flattening that curve. That's one thing. But I think you really just need to have your home prepped in a way that it makes it accessible for the movers. I mean, I think that's really one of the easiest ways. You should meet your mover at the door. They should have a crew chief there who will be introducing all the members of that crew to you. They should be putting protective coverings on the floors and other areas of the home to ensure they're not doing property damage. And then you need to be accessible to them, because there will be questions. Is this going? Is that going? You might have a separate one bathroom for them to access, and that would be one area. They'd have another area that's kind of, you let them know this is an off limits area. And that's where you're putting the things that you're carrying with you or that are not moving in that particular area. The more organized you are, the better the move is going to be, the smoother the process, and the less likelihood that there will be problems. I mean,
probably, because this is from my experience quickly, is that not everybody on the crew has the same level of understanding of the DoD program necessarily, right? So find who the crew chief is, talk to the whole crew, tell them what you want. But if you have questions or concerns, then find the person that's probably more steeped in the DoD program specifically, who has more of the experience level in that, and try and engage with that person. Obviously, the coordinator and those kind of things as well.
It's not always the driver, but more times than not, it is the driver of the truck, particularly if you're doing a domestic move and it's in a regular moving van. That guy, the predominance of those people are what we call owner operators. That means that they are their own small business, and they own a $100,000, $200,000 truck that's sitting out there, and they've got a vested interest in ensuring that your move is handled appropriately, because they're graded. Their pay is determined much by your satisfaction. So it really behooves you to build a relationship with that crew chief, who is likely the driver, and they can get answers to the questions that you need to have answered immediately right there about the actual process going on in your home.
And I just want to jump in that is something that we talked about last week too, is that when your crews arrive at your home, setting the tone for your move, letting them know, specifics of anything that you may be done, or asking any specific questions right then, so things can be handled up front instead of waiting till halfway through the day and asking, well, this has to be packed a certain way, or I need this done, or, finding them in the bathroom that you already cleaned because they didn't know you wanted them in the one down the hall kind of deal. So all about that, setting the expectations and setting the tone when they show up at your home.
Yeah. I mean, and I would always say to the individuals that are moving, point out to the crew chief those items that are of particular interest to you. If you break little Johnny's G.I. Joe, that may not be a big deal. Maybe it will be. I don't know. But, if you've got grandma's China hutch or, some piece that is a family heirloom, you need to point these things out, and so that you ensure that everybody knows this is the key thing. If something goes wrong with this thing, then the whole move has gone wrong. So I think the movers appreciate that. They want to know the things that are important to you so that they take that just little bit of extra care to ensure that nothing goes wrong with that item.
Yeah, and that's also identifying those high value items up front. Again, not waiting till halfway through the day and saying, oh, my china needs to be on high value, and they've already got it halfway packed or sealed up, and they're not sure which dining room labeled box that it's in. But it's identifying that stuff up front and letting them know so it can be packed and marked accordingly.
100%. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so we're all about the pivot, right, in the military community, because that's like our lives. So, hi, welcome to our everyday, people. If you're a civilian, now you get it. Okay, so next year, Transcom's looking to transition to this Global Household Goods Contract, otherwise known as, yet another acronym, GHC. Remember that, people. Remember that. So what I would like to know from both of you is, A, what's your take on that process? And B, how do you think it's going to impact both the industry and military families overall?
Oh boy, Dan, I'm glad I'm the president because I get to throw the hard ones at you.
Should we have started this one at the top of the hour? Or all right, you're gonna throw it at me. I'll start off. Our perspective on the GHC. I would say that as an association and a lot of our members, we would argue that a lot of things probably could have been done prior to getting to this point, right? That there were a lot of potential changes to the program that could have been made without turning the entire industry on its head, right? And kind of, in some respects, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that's kind of what's going to happen. So a lot of companies are going to be out of business. Things are going to change significantly in those kind of terms on the way shipments are handled. I would also say up front, and I think Chuck would say this as well, we don't have any issue with any of the companies who bid on the program. We know those people. They're good people. They're good movers. They want to do a good job, and they bid on the program. Most of them are already in the program and working it. Many of them have military backgrounds, right? So it's not that there's this kind of evil companies out there that are bidding on this to take over. These are good, solid companies that do good work in the moving, and they're competing to take over the contract. As if you're in the business, it'd be a smart thing to do, right? Try and win that contract for your company. But I just think that this is going to be a significant and abrupt change for the industry as it is. I think there were issues that the Transcom commander highlighted that he thought needed to be better. He thought capacity, and we talked about why some of that is stretched in the middle of the peak season right now, that we can't get all the move capacity, the trucks, the drivers, the warehouses, the packing crews exactly when we want them. It's a finite number, and I think it always will be. And he thought higher quality. And again, I think some of the quality issues that we deal with are dealt with right in that really short stretch window. Not that nothing happens in the off season that is problematic, but generally as a broad brush of averages, things get better in the non-peak. So, he wanted quality capacity with the contract and felt like he could get it and through a contract. And what I would say is that there were ways to get after some of those issues without standing the industry on its head and going after it via a contract that people could have worked on and gotten better. And there's time that could have been again, I know Transcom didn't really want to get into doing a study. In their mind, they felt like studies have been done, and there are too many studies. But what I would say is there's nothing specific within the contract that suggests that there'll be more capacity or higher quality just because it went to a contract, right? There's no magical thing that was added to the contract that necessarily gives you those two things. It's more of a hope that the philosophy that Transcom or the DoD chose to go down will result in higher quality and more capacity to move people whenever they want to move them, without having to try and smooth out their demand. But what I would say is the contract in and of itself doesn't fix the issues that were identified by Transcom. It's just another method that they're going to try and go about accomplishing the moves.
So if I could, so the contract is going to move from, right now we have about 900 or so transportation service providers. What a transportation service provider indicates is that you are a direct contractor to the US government. And then you have a couple of thousand companies underneath of those that do, we call them agents, that are doing the actual packing, loading, delivering, storing, etc. So there's literally at least 3,000 companies that can be involved in this whole web process. Here's where I see problems. You're moving between 350 and 400,000 shipments. That's not individuals, because sometimes individuals have 2 or 3 or 4 shipments. But you're talking about 350 to 400,000 shipments, and you are giving all of that over to one company to manage. One. That is a dramatic change. And I will tell you, can it work? Maybe it can. But the growing pains associated with transitioning from this one company is going to be, I think, very, very problematic. And the problems are going to land on military service members' families. They're the ones who are going to feel the impact of it. And so I am very afraid of this transition. Right now, the contract has been awarded, but the contract is under protest, just like every other giant contract. This contract, over the life of the contract, is $20 billion. That's with a B. This is a huge contract. That's 8 or 9 years. That would be the full length of the contract. So there are a couple of protests that are in front of the Government Accountability Office. Right now, they have to rule on those by December 2nd. Then I, in my heart of hearts, believe there's going to be another step in the legal process where it will go to a federal court, probably the Court of Federal Claims, where further actions will be taken in dispute of the award winner. I think eventually it's going to be awarded and let and be finally decided through all the protests. And that might be a year or 2 down the road. Right now, it's currently scheduled to start in February of next year. I don't think we're going to meet that because of the legal problems that we're seeing right now. But when it does happen, all of the military families need to understand that there is change in the offing, and the way that the business is handled today is not going to be the way that the business is handled tomorrow. So there's going to be a significant learning curve.
Okay, so you rip the Band-Aid off. Here I go. Because
go get them, MJ.
You can just go ahead and write all of this down. Okay, audience. So basically what he's saying, from the mover's perspective, the people who are actually physically moving your stuff, that what may happen is that it's going to get a lot harder before it gets a lot better. That is a projection.
That's right.
Of course, it's always a wait and see. I mean, the motto of all military branches is like, hurry up and wait, right? So it's one of them things. But yeah, you know what? It has me concerned too. So if I'm a military family member, which I am, and if I'm scheduled to PCS, which I'm not, thank you, Jesus, and it's come, early 2021. Okay, so I don't only have COVID to deal with, now I have to deal with these mass amounts of changes that may or may not be able to accommodate my and 350 to 400,000 moves per year. Is that what you're telling me?
That's exactly what I'm telling you. The other thing, it's in a phased approach. So what's going to happen, and people really are going to have to understand this, the timetable now, though we've been told even by Transcom that because of the protests and legal action, this is going to shift, the timeline is going to shift to the right. But what we will be operating in is an environment where the contractor will start moving U.S. domestic moves first. That's going to transition in over a 4-month period. So if you're in the middle of that period, you might have your next door neighbor moving under the current program, and I'm moving under this contracted program. And then the international program would be starting months later, and the same kind of transition. So we're going to have people moving in 2 different programs, but oh my goodness, the non-temp storage, if you're going overseas, the non-temp storage program does not transition to the contract. So you could have shipments moving under multiple contracts, different people operating. Who do I call? Who's in charge of this, that, and the other thing? I just, this transition is going to be a quagmire.
And you know what? I just want to let you guys both know, Dan, because I want to hear from you too. I just want to let you all know that as we're talking about this, you're getting some questions. We're gonna be diving down in those questions. But Dan, yes, please piggyback.
I would just say too, to just kind of add on to what Chuck was saying, that there's more than likely, right, very high probability that people are going to have shipments underneath a TSP, not necessarily with that local moving agent, right? Most of those, a lot of those local agents will have to still be in the program, right? A single company is not going to be able to touch every move, right? So a lot of that network will probably still exist. A lot of the TSP won't even be a thing anymore, right? The TSP will be gone. That terminology will essentially be gone. But in that transition piece, that's going to be, I think, extremely difficult, that Chuck said. You could have a move going on with the TSP who knows, based on the way the transition of the program is going out, that your move is being moved by somebody responsible who won't even be in the program in a few months down the road, right? I mean, you're going to be your stuff being moved and be responsible on that to that TSP, and they already know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that they're not going to be existing anymore. So
yeah, we're going to have some good growing pains, as with any change that we're all just going to have to kind of work through. So your opportunity, Chuck and Dan, right now, is there anything else coming from the moving industry side of the house? Anything else that you want to share, tell to the military community?
Yeah, just philosophically, I really do believe, everyone talks about it. Moving is one of the most stressful experiences in anyone's life, and military families, I did it, are expected to move many, many times and have to deal with that stress. Moving companies understand that, and they really, really are trying to do the best job that they can. But obviously, things happen in any industry. Things happen, and as you might get that first call from the transportation office, and they're the shining light, and then you talk to your move coordinator, and he or she is just doing an amazing job, and then you get to the crew chief, and he comes in with a big smile on his face and really is knowledgeable, and you get that one guy. You get that one guy who's problematic, and that's not a reflection of the entire moving industry and the entire process. There's always that one person who is the one that clogs up the drain. And I would just ask you to take the perspective of the people that are coming into my home are going to try to do the very best job that they can possibly do. And if there are issues, I believe that 99.9% of the transportation service providers are going to try to resolve those problems in the best way possible. Do we fail? We do. But the customer satisfaction surveys that you're asked to fill out, and unfortunately, we only get about 30% of those filled out. I'd love to see more of them, indicate that we are up in the low to mid 90% satisfied or better rate. I'd hold that up against just about any industry that's out there. Do we make mistakes? We do. And as Dan has really done a nice job of laying out, probably most of those mistakes happen when we're asked to move from a 4, a 5, a 6,000 shipment a week to 12,000 shipments. And when you try to cram that 12,000 into a 6,000 pound bag, it doesn't work real well. And so we have problems. So again, we have the best intentions. We really want to do a great job for the men and women and their families in the military services. But at times we make mistakes.
Yeah, and if I can just reinforce what Chuck said, I think, as evidenced by my military background, Chuck's military background, and his family, what I was impressed with when I joined this side of the industry, a little over 2 years ago, was everywhere I go, there are people who are in the industry, who are retired from the military, who did 4 years, tour in the military, whose uncle or aunt was in the military, whose son or daughter is currently serving in the military. And those people are peppered throughout the industry. And I assure you, they want to do a good job for military families. It's a lot of them, it's why they are with those industries, right? They would much rather try and make a move good and be respectful of what's going on for a military family than just a normal family, in the commercial world or residential world that doesn't have that background. There's pride in that, and you see it and hear it. And people don't say that to me because of where I come from. It's just, it becomes evident when you're kind of out and about that the people are very interested in moving military families. And I will tell you, there are easier moves to make. There are a lot of rules and regulations associated with moving the DoD that makes it very tough for moving. And it is easier to do a national account move, move some corporations personnel, or to do a local residential move. There's a lot of requirements to understand and to know in the DoD side, but there are movers out there who really focus on that. And that's what they want to do because they have pride in it. They have a connection to it personally through relatives or themselves or whatever. And they want to make sure that things are going well. And as Chuck said, sometimes that fails. There's a break in the link in that chain sometimes, but not for a lot of great intentions from a lot of people who, like I say, have a military background and are proud that they are moving military families.
So I'm sorry, you broke my brain a little bit. I'm still trying to recover from the last question a little bit.
Our brains are broken too. I tell you, that's not exactly.
And it's a lot to think about, but I'd like to think that again, our families are very used to pivoting, but there's only so much that we can take, and the more information we have ahead of time, the more we're able to prepare, the easier it's going to be in a very stressful situation. Like a lot of people, I use the acronym pretty crappy situation, PCS. Yeah, there's tons of different ways you can play with that, trust me. That's the most PG way, by the way. So there's a lot. I mean, here's the thing, audience. I'm going to tell you right now, we are going to get to your questions. Some of them we're going to get to verbally. Some of them we're going to actually, both Chuck and Dan, they're not going anywhere. They're now our BFFs. Like, we're going to stay in contact with them. And we're going to get those answers for you. If not right this second, directly after we're done here. Every resource that was mentioned will be put in those comments box. Everything that you could potentially, that was talked about today, will be available to you live and in living color. So we're gonna sorry, I'm really serious right now. We're gonna have you guys back on. I'm just gonna there's gonna be a 2.0 in the future, okay? For sure. But there's a couple that I want to get to before we head off, and we're gonna answer the remainder of the questions once we're offline. But don't worry, once we get through these questions, we've got that 125 $125 gift card to Amazon times 2. We got 2 of those to give away. And so be ready. First question that I just that was up here a little earlier was from, Jordan Terry. Shout out, Jordan. Okay. We had to pay out of pocket to temporarily store our long-term storage for the stuff we're not taking to Japan because none of the transportation companies around us had any room to hold our stuff due to the stop move. Is this something that will be reimbursed?
Go ahead, please.
No, I would say it can be. That's something that you have to file with your transportation office. You can only be reimbursed up to the government rate. So if you're paying $100 a month, but the government rate is $50, you're going to be on a pocket on it. So just be aware of that. But there's forms you can fill out at your local transportation office. So follow up with them, and they can help walk you through that process. But you can be reimbursed up to that government rate.
Right. Yeah, that was probably a non-temp storage move, an NTS move, and the government is always looking for providers because, again, to go out and procure a warehouse, many of those warehouses are 20, 30, 40, 50,000 square feet. It is a huge financial outlay, and then the requirements that they put on the warehouse, ensuring that it's got a sprinkler system in it, that it has a rodent control system, that it has a security system. I mean, there are the laundry list of requirements that people, as already has been talked about, that dealing in other markets in the moving industry, they don't have to have and meet all of those requirements. So to get enough warehouse space to be able to handle all of these shipments, and there's a non-temp storage shipment probably with almost every overseas move. So it's difficult. There's just no question about it. Thus, this idea of spreading it out a bit. Let's flatten that curve, demand smoothing, so that we're not trying to shove everything into those warehouses at all the same time.
Makes sense. It makes sense. So I'm looking through all these comments, and by the way, there's a ton of people. Carl, I think Carl's with y'all. Smoke break equals mask break. That's a great way to send it out. I think we're going to turn it into a hashtag.
One of our employees, by the way.
Awesome. Shout out, Carl. And then this was and we get at least 1 to 2 to 10 of these each week. I just want to show you this because this is the fruit of our labor and yours, our guests, for, all of this info is great. All of my questions have been answered. So please know that is huge. If we help one person each time, that's what we go for. And shoot, every episode I learn something new. So I'm just saying. Great. For those of you such as Lisa Peterson, shout out, and Kelly Rich again, regarding, the change in the contract change and how that will impact us, and, whether that's storage, will impact storage or move coordinators or claims. I'm going to forward these over, and we're going to talk about that once we get offline with both Chuck and Dan, so that we can properly answer your questions, because they are full of knowledge and I don't want to misspeak. And we are 17 minutes over, and even though it's our 25th episode and it's totally worth it because we've got $250 worth of Amazon coming your way, we've got a lot. It's COVID and people are homeschooling, and oh my God, I can feel the frizz in your hair right now. So I feel you.
Not in mine. I don't know.
So we just got the names, and while I'm pulling these names into the hat, our wheel of names, is there any saved rounds? Is there any, would you like us to just go ahead and is there points of contact on your website that we listed earlier that you would, refer somebody to if they had additional questions?
Yeah, no, if you have any questions, it's so funny because I get questions all the time. In fact, one of the transportation offices, one of their key personnel called me over the weekend trying to get me to help with getting some personnel out to a residence because they couldn't get a hold of anybody on the weekend. Look, we're here to help. We really are. As Dan has already said, we are very vested in our military families. My email address is on our website. We've got our whole staff there. Dan's email address is on our website. If any of you have any questions or have any issues you'd want to raise or concerns about an organization, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're not going to try to turn away from you. We will definitely respond. So our email addresses are on our website.
Wonderful. And we will be dropping those links here shortly for everyone. Okay, now it's time to
Drum
share
roll.
the wheel of names. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Here we go. So the winner of the very first Amazon gift card totaling $125 is, drum roll, folks. Here we go.
I like it. I like it.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
All right.
Elizabeth.
All right.
Woo! Okay, Elizabeth, if you could go ahead and message our page with your email address, please, so we can get in contact with you. Just go ahead and message us at PCS Grades on Facebook, and we will get your email and correspond with you on getting your card. Congrats. All right. The second one that we have to give away, drum roll. Kelly Rich!
Hi, congratulations, Kelly.
Congratulations. Yes, congratulations indeed. Indubitably. Stop screen. Nobody wants to see my mess inside my brain. Okay. So, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Kelly, please message us at PCS Grades so I can get your email address and we can get that on the ball for your $125 Amazon card. There are some other things that will be coming your way, but we are also going to be honoring our Oconus following because we know that you're sleeping right now, but you will replay and you will have a chance to win as well. We'll go ahead and announce that next week. I really want to thank that our guests today. We've been on for an hour and 20 minutes and there was not a dull moment, especially there towards the end. If you want to go ahead and replay, that was pretty awesome. My brain breaks. You can see it probably in my eyes. Go ahead and check that out. Throw us some love. And again, we're dropping all the links and we're going to keep in touch with both Chuck and Dan. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us today. This has been a very successful episode. You need to know that up front. And until next week, y'all. Megan, why don't you go for it this time? Until next week.
This too shall PCS.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.